Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz pianist Noah Haidu. He's promoting his 2017 CD Infinite Distances, and he talked about how he got into jazz as a kid from Charlottesville, Virginia. He grew up loving classical, avant-garde rock, and jazz, and his mentors were Bill Charlap, Kenny Barron, Bruce Barth, Barry Harris, and the great David Hazeltine. Over his career, he has combined new rhythmic ideas, harmonic sophistication, spontaneity, soul, and swing into his own way of making jazz. So get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Hey, Noah, thank you for taking some time out for me today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And let me go ahead and start off here and ask you, your latest album, Infinite Distances, it's a great album. Thank you for sending that over to me. I want to kind of know, what are you doing to promote the album, and what's going on with you lately?
I've been performing with the group at various venues, including Birdland, and we did Andi Musique in Baltimore, and the Falcon up in Marlboro, New York. And we did Twins Jazz in Washington, D.C. Other than that, the CD has, as you know, has gotten a good amount of radio play, and it's gotten covered in Downbeat magazine and received 4.5 stars in Downbeat, and also got a nice article in Downbeat separate from that. So it's gotten and it's been reviewed all over the world and so on, and gotten so it's gotten great press. It's been a somewhat quiet time for me in terms of I haven't performed as much as I wanted to. I don't know if you followed all the events surrounding this, but my dad passed away a couple of days, like 2 days before the CD came out.
Oh no!
And so that was a huge thing. He actually got me started in jazz, and it's just been a massive event that took some of the time away from performing and promoting that I wanted, and had some other personal things. So I just more or less just had to. I recently moved as well, and I'm just sitting to you, talking to you from my new apartment due to some other family changes that happened, and it seemed like everything happened all at the same time. But I'm a little bit over the hump, and will be doing much more to promote and perform the whole thing in the future. So I don't know. That's basically the truth and the upshot of what's been going on.
No, that's a lot of heavy all at once. My condolences on losing your father. I lost mine about 8 years ago, and
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's a whole new chapter in your life, and I guess the only real thing that you can take from massive momentum periods of change is that the pain just teaches you to enjoy the pleasure more, I guess. So,
it was very interesting how it all worked out, because, I had this February, I guess the CD, basically my CD release was on February 9th at Birdland, or was supposed to be. So when my dad passed on February 7th, I took him to the emergency room a few days before, and I called Birdland. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to perform. And so they offered to reschedule my CD release for the 16th of April, which turned out to be Easter Sunday. And I just decided to make it rather than really focus on the CD release, I decided to make it a memorial concert for my dad. So, and that felt really like the right thing to do. I mean, the CD had been dedicated to him anyways from back. That was all decided back in this last summer. And, in terms of the liner notes and everything. And this was and as I already said, my dad started me on jazz from a young age. I mean, not intending to make me a jazz musician, but he played all the music and Monk and stuff for me from when I was, real little, and was very involved with my different mentors and finding me the teachers and taking me to the lessons and things as I got serious about it. The time I spent with my dad after my parents separated, were very important times when I really, the music really took hold for me and was able to to really explore it to the degree that I really wanted to. So, and then after he moved back to New York, and he moved to New York about 8 years ago, right before my daughter was born, and he started coming to every gig and started to have, that's right around the time when my CDs started coming out anyways, and for unrelated to that, but and so as my career was starting to happen as a recording artist, my dad was here in New York and was able to come to a lot of the concerts and sort of, so it's something I've really shared with him my whole life in a very profound way. So it was very fitting that this, what had started out as a CD release concert, became a memorial concert for my dad, and it was on Easter Sunday at Birdland this past April 16th. It was a pretty huge event. It was basically a big jazz club, and it was just about sold out, and I was very proud of it. I thought the music was great, and a lot of it was music that was off of the CD, and it just the way it worked out. So I think it's taken me some time to really recover from all this and get this move that I had done, and I think I'm going to be diving into really trying to push the recording and performing this summer and beyond. That's sort of where everything. That's how the timeline with everything worked out.
You kind of opened up a portal to other questions that I had, and growing up in Charlottesville, Virginia, you said your dad was a huge instigator of sorts of getting you into jazz. What music did he get you into? Albums or shows? What did he do to get you baptized in the jazz arts?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, by the time I was my dad would take me to every kind of music. And after we lived in Charlottesville, we moved to Urbana, Illinois. There wasn't necessarily a ton of stuff there, but if it was world music, or if it was a percussion ensemble was giving a concert at the University of Illinois, or whatever it was, like we would go hear it. And what happened was, after my parents split up, my dad moved out to Los Angeles, and the year I spent with him in LA I was 15 years old, and the concerts that we went to were incredible. I mean, we went to hear Oscar Peterson, we heard Gene Harris, we heard Herbie Hancock, we heard Wynton Marsalis, we heard the touring group with the Miles Tribute Band with Wallace Roney, Herbie, Tony Williams, Ron Carter, and Wayne Shorter, and we heard Chick Corea with Dave Weckl and John Patitucci. It was like whatever was happening, we were there. We heard Horace Tapscott, who was an LA, a pianist known well beyond LA, but who was based in LA. We went to everything, and we went to hear Sting, which was one of the first, which was an artist that I was just listening to as a high school kid, but it was also a way in for me to jazz, because that's how I first heard Kenny Kirkland and Branford Marsalis, and there were jazz players playing in that group at that time, and I mean, we went to hear Eric Clapton, because I was a lover of guitar and blues. I played guitar at that age, so if I was like, Dad, I've got to hear B.B. King, I've got to hear Albert Collins, and we heard all those artists. We would go to blues festivals, we would go to funky clubs, wherever we needed to go, we were there. So it was I was very lucky with all of that. I mean, it wasn't just my dad. I had great teachers. I mean, my mom also took me to hear things when I was with her, and so on. But it was all of that, and that those concerts that my dad took me to had a huge impact. So I'm very grateful for that, and it's hard to put a price on it. You're just happy that you had it. Yeah. If I had to pick, I remember in particular hearing Gene Harris and Ray Brown and Jeff Hamilton. was a drummer, and that was such a profound night for me because that was, for me, all I wanted to hear at that time in my life was bluesy stuff, and that group connects the blues that I was so in love with swing and jazz, and they also, there's a gospel quality, and they were influenced by the Oscar Peterson trio, which Ray Brown was a part of, and so that for me was just like, I mean, I was listening to that stuff from age 15 up to 19, 20, 21. That stuff was huge for me. So that's one of the most important, things I've heard. And I'd say hearing Herbie Hancock playing with Tony Williams and Ron Carter in that Miles tribute band was like also just a revelation, because I didn't understand it, but I just knew that someday I was going to have to, get into modern jazz, and that it was overwhelming, but it was incredible at the same time, and the incredible chemistry that those artists had. So it was, and my dad, he after I got to New York, he would come and visit me here sometimes, and we'd go to Bradley's and hear Kenny Barron and Ben Riley and Paul West or Ray Drummond and all sorts of. We heard Kenny Kirkland playing with Carmen Lundy and Victor Lewis and Curtis Lundy. So I'm just in recent years, in the last few years, my dad and I also used to always go hear Keith Jarrett playing solo, or Keith Jarrett playing with Jack DeJohnette, but we heard Keith Jarrett's classic trio, and it's I mean those are some of the concerts that we went to. I guess I can't say every single one, but it would be a fun exercise.
Cool. No, that sounds like a complete circus of good jazz right there. So you've been well educated. You went to Rutgers University, and then you moved on to get your BFA at the New School University, and then the State University of New York. So your mentors were Kenny Barron, Bill Charlap, Bruce Barth, Barry Harris, and David Hazeltine. That had to be one special experience to be around that kind of jazz force.
It was. I mean, you get such different things from everybody. I mean, I think I'm not sure if I did the order right. I think I maybe should have started with who I ended with, because, David Hazeltine is like, he was my final mentor, and he had this thing of like really studying things in such an exact way so that you really learn, and he would, you really learn these exact solos and play along with the record note for note, and you learn how to find ways of extracting the knowledge that's in those solos and putting it in your playing, and not just solos, but just learn studying the record note for note, and really making all that your own. And that was a great, such a great experience. And then my first mentor was Kenny Barron, and that was amazing because I was living in New Jersey at Rutgers and studying with Kenny Barron, and he was so incredibly. First, we didn't do that kind of exact study. It was just like general stuff, but it was just so incredibly musical. Kenny just oozing this incredible swing and music that he would just sit down and he play a beautiful solo, maybe play a ballad, and every time he played Darn That Dream or Body and Soul, every time it would be a masterpiece. It was never anything less than just you would want to record it and listen to it every day. And I couldn't do anything like that. I couldn't play a ballad. I couldn't even play a ballad tempo, I was like 18 at the time, and I just couldn't. And but he was from Philly, and Philly was close by, and there was still a jazz scene, and he had grown up in that Philly jazz scene from playing in clubs from when he was like way too young to be there, like 12 years old, and playing in sort of in funky jazz clubs, and I started going to the Philly jazz scene. I was so inspired by Kenny and the way the music was so internal. It wasn't thought about so much, or it wasn't talked about in an intellectual way. He's a very intellectual person, intellectual player, but he doesn't talk about the music that way. But I could hear that he had the feeling of it was so deep, and so I would go to Philly and hang out and try to find the roots of how he had gotten the scene that had nourished him, and so I would go to Philly jazz clubs like 4 or 5 nights a week and sit in with people like Mickey Roker and Bobby Durham and other less well-known nationally players, but people who like Lucy Barnes who were making a great contribution and who really had the jazz feeling and the knowledge. So that was another kind of education. You know, on the one hand, you're studying and transcribing records, and then the other side of it was, you know, sitting in with the players and absorbing the jazz scene in a different way. Actually, being there on the scene and sitting in with people. So
that sounds like the best way to figure it all out for sure.
Yeah.
You know, you've spent your life watching a lot of really good people play. You're obviously a very astute student of jazz and the history of jazz. So it has to be a complete, absolute dream realized to have been able to play with people like Benny Golson and, you know, Vincent Herring and a lot of heavyweights, Jeremy Pelt, and to play at places, like you said, like Birdland and the Blue Note and Jazz at Lincoln Center. Does it still, every time you climb on stage at places like that, make you just a little bit reflective on this life that you used to watch people and listen to people that played there, and now you're doing that? Does that ever cross your mind?
That specific thing doesn't, I mean, when you're doing it, I'm so hyped at the moment that I'm in the moment, so it's hard to stand back and see the big picture. It's very consuming to do your best work and you know, with those kinds of players and those venues. So I'm not thinking about it at the time. One player, Vincent Herring, in particular is interesting because I really did come up listening to him playing with Nat Adderley's band with Walter Booker and Jimmy Cobb, and that was a huge thing for me. And so then to meet him at jam sessions and to have him invite me over to his place to play and to start to do some performing together, it feels like a very interesting development, and it's great to see that. You know, it does feel like I've come a long way, but at the same time, I'm not the type to dwell on that kind of thing. I'm always looking at the next thing. You know, where am I trying to go with it? You know, whatever level you accomplish, there's always so much more. I mean, if you do. You know, if you get if you play a night at a great venue, then the next thing is, well, when am I going to play a week here, and so on. If you get a great festival gig, you know, then the next thing is, well, when am I going to be touring for the whole summer with my band? It's in where I am now still feels like where you just get used to wherever you are, and you're always striving for the next thing. That's my approach. I am very grateful for all those opportunities, and I appreciate every, you know, it's especially the musical side of it, you know, like when Vincent Herring plays a solo that has a lot of feeling, or hearing Benny Golson's tone on the saxophone, or any of the players that you mentioned. It's really appreciating what they're doing right at the moment and what you can absorb from them and their special musical personalities. That's what it's really about. Yeah.
So you get this love of jazz from your dad early on in your life, and now you're a veteran of the jazz circuit. So I got a simple question I want to ask you. Why do you love jazz?
Yeah, that was really a slow process. I talked about this at my dad's memorial, because I remember him that first time what I remember is the first time in the jazz. It sounded so, he's playing Monk for me, and he's sipping on a scotch or gin and tonic in the living room, and he's kind of dancing and acting. And I'm like, man, this is so weird. The music's weird. My dad's acting weird. And why? I didn't like it immediately. And I don't know if I know the answer. It became so, I just worked my way in slowly. I didn't mean to be in jazz. I got grabbed. So I want to say freedom. It's the level of expression that you get to, and the feeling that you physically get when playing that is really beyond hard to compare to. And you know, when there's a special feeling among musicians that have a certain freedom in what they're doing. In other words, everyone's being creative and responding to each other and doing something collective, and that is a very powerful feeling. I definitely think group music is the most, to me, is the most rewarding, and jazz feels so exhilarating to do, you know, to play a solo that you start one place and you take it another place and hopefully build it up to a climax, and you just can't do it every time. You're not going to play an amazing solo on every song every night, but you strive for it, and when you get to the, you know, going beyond just being competent and playing, you know, the true expressive work and that with the excitement and the feeling, it's just the best rush in the world. It's really a real rush. I mean, it's a drug. It's totally addictive. It's addictive. I mean, but luckily there's no side effects.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a good addiction, that's for sure. What is one of the nicest things that a fan has ever said to you after a show or about one of your performances?
Something funny happened recently. I mean, I think there's a few different answers I could come up with, but this is probably not. But recently, when I was playing in Baltimore, there was one young man that was sitting near the front. He came up to me after the concert, and I didn't know him, and so and you know, there were most of the people there I didn't know, and so he said, he's like, yeah, you don't remember me, but I go to I think it was Carnegie Mellon or no, he goes to Johns Hopkins, which was right nearby the venue on the music where I was playing. And he says, you know, I was your student for quite a few years, and he'd grown up so much, and he's like, I never heard you play, and it's like your music is beautiful. It's so great, and I'm so glad I got to hear you. And it was just cool to see someone who I'd known as a young person, you know, and I think I taught him Chameleon or some tunes like that, like Mercy Mercy and maybe Watermelon Man or something like that. And to see him, to have him grow up and take a real interest and pleasure in music as an adult, and to sort of mature and to, you know, come back and see me in a different light, and it was very special. So that off the top of my head, that's just the first thing that popped into my mind. It's nice to it's just nice to really connect. People are very generous and very kind, and they seem to feel very great about the music after the shows, and I'm always great. It's a pleasure to have that type of audience contact. So you know, I appreciate that a lot.
You know, the beauty of life, or I guess the quagmire that we all kind of swim in, is that everyone has perceptions of who we are. You know, your family, your friends, your people that you work with in a business environment, musicians, fans. But at the end of the day, we carry the cards. We have our own perception of who we are. So let me ask you this. Who do you think you are? When you wake up and face the world, who are you?
That's a heavy question. I mean, I'm a jazz pianist. I'm a father, and this is not in order, by the way, and I'd say I'm an educator as well. That's who I am. I also am a performer of other kinds of music, but I think jazz is that what I compose is and what my central focus is jazz. Yeah, a composer, I think is right up there, like within the first, you know, it's one of my top priorities. That's it. I mean, that's who I am. I think beyond that, it's always, I mean, my music has been and continues to evolve. And I know some of what's coming, but 10 years from now, I don't know what it's going to be like exactly. But I know it evolved quite a bit from the last 10 years, and certainly from my first CD. Yeah.
I think ending things with the word evolution is a very apropos way, based on the way this interview began. So I think right here is a good stopping point. Noah, thank you for taking some time out. Thank you for the music, and good luck with everything in the future.
Oh man, it was a pleasure. Great to talk to you. I hope we get to do it again, and hopefully we'll meet in person one day.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Virginia, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Noah for his music and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.